Hi and welcome to today's episode. Our guest today spent 23 years teaching in primary schools and half of that in senior leadership roles until she found herself in burnout. Lindsey loved teaching, but she'd worked herself into a pretty black hole, lacking confidence and clarity, struggling with perimenopausal symptoms including anxiety. So Lindsey's here today to share her story of what she's learned about managing her health after overhauling her entire career and lifestyle to now feel that she's living a somewhat balanced life. I think she's going to share that there's still work to do. There is no finish line, as I always say. And she now runs her own business as a maths tutoring expert. So welcome, Lindsey Fekete, to the podcast.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It's great to have you here. And I am really looking forward to exploring your story because I know we've chatted previously and I've heard you talk about this and how big a shift you've made in your life, but not just career-wise, to your health so that you never experience what you experienced when you did hit burnout. And, I know that it's very common for someone like you, career woman who's juggling a very stressful, demanding job alongside a family and a home to experience burnout. And sadly, we are seeing more and more women especially suffer with burnout. It is cited in the UK that about 46% of women at any one point of time are feeling burnout. And a recent report found that 88% of the UK workforce has experienced burnout at some point. So, we can see how widespread this is. And I have spoke about stress on the podcast a few times and I had some other guests chatting about that. And we did dive into burnout and how different burnout is to stress. So I'm looking forward to uncovering and helping people to understand that more today. But just to kick off, I always ask our guests to share what their most impactful healthy habit is. So what works best for you, Lindsey?
I think that at the moment it's recognising when I need to have some brain space. I'm quite an introverted person and it took me a long time for me to realise that my energy gets depleted when I'm spending a lot of time with other people. And although I love doing that, I need to take some time by myself to re-energise, recharge the batteries. So I do that now. I do things where I'm having time alone. It might just be walking by myself or maybe going to the spa for a morning or something to just have a few hours, a chunk of time where I am by myself and quiet and just, it gives me a chance to rejuvenate my brain a little bit.
That sounds perfect. And one of the things that I have spoke about on here with the guest before is about self-awareness and how few of us really know how we work, like what makes us tick. As you said there, you're very introverted and you've realised how important it is for you to have that time for you, as you said, to rejuvenate, to recover. And that's something I really try to emphasise to people is, it's your life, it's your health, and we're all individual. So I love how you've shared that you're really aware of that and you are trying to embed those kind of habits to best support you.
I think it took me a long time to get to that point. Sorry. It's taken a long time. It wasn't overnight. And when I look back in retrospect, I've always needed that. Even as a teenager, I needed that. I just didn't know at the time what was happening and why I needed it.
Yeah, it's so easy to just go along with what you see everybody else doing. And obviously part of what we're all struggling with our health is, the busyness of life in our culture and society, and how we think the more we do, the closer to happiness and fulfillment we're going to be. But that isn't the case for most people, and certainly not for people who are the type of personality and makeup who need different things to help them be their best and to feel energized and so on. So yeah, it's very normal, isn't it? And often, unfortunately, it takes a health crisis for people to have to pause and reconsider what's going on and how they live their life, which was your story. So to get started with your story, Lindsey, tell me a bit about what life was like pre-burnout.
Okay, so I've got two children. I've got twins who have just turned 12, so they were it was a couple of years ago, so they were a couple of years younger. I was working full time as a deputy head teacher in a primary school, and my husband was running his own business. He'd just started his own business. We'd been through lockdown, he'd been made redundant a couple of times, and I think a few different things had happened that just meant that my anxiety levels or stress levels were building. But I think when I look back, it wasn't just one event. It wasn't just this thing happened and it tipped me over the edge. It was just a cumulative effect, probably over 2 or 3 years. And also learning now about perimenopause, I'd probably been going through perimenopause for quite a few years. So I'm just 49. Probably since my early 40s, I think I've been experiencing an increase of symptoms like anxiety and stress and sleep. My sleep had been affected, and I hadn't really known that because I had my children quite late. So I had young children at that age as well. And I just presumed it was young children, busy life, stressful job. And it sort of, they all crept in and merged together, and I just didn't know that's what it was. So I got, I'd been doing my job. It was quite stressful. It was very stressful, quite stressful. It was very stressful, a lot of responsibility and a lot of pressure that had just built over time. I don't think COVID helped, but it definitely wasn't the only thing to just add into the mix. One day I got up to go to work and couldn't get up to go to work, and I just couldn't get out of bed, and I just couldn't function, and I didn't see it coming, and I didn't know what was happening. But then again, there's a story behind sort of the few weeks before that. I think I've realised what was happening to my mind, and my mind just decided that if I wasn't going to stop, that it was going to do something for me to make me stop and have that break. It was not a very pleasant time, but it meant that I took time to re-evaluate what I wanted and what I needed to do. And then I made a huge change and I left teaching. And I've been teaching for 21 years, so it was a huge change. I didn't really know what else I was going to do. It took me a long time to work out, really, quite a few months to work out what I was going to do. So, yeah, huge shift.
Yeah, and that must have been incredibly scary, not just for you, but for your husband and family, to be in that place of not being able to get out of bed. And, how did it feel physically as well as mentally when you literally woke up that day and couldn't get up?
Well, it was very short-lived, luckily. It was only happened, that sort of intense part only really happened for, it's all quite a blur, but probably about a week or so. So physically, I could get up and move. It wasn't a situation where, my body had shut down completely and I couldn't get up. But I sat in bed and I knew my alarm had gone off. I knew I had to get up and start getting ready. But every time I went to do that and to think, because I don't know, but I used to wake up in the morning, run through what I was doing for the day, what have I got to do, where am I going, where have I got to be, and then you just get going, don't you? You just get started. And I kept thinking, okay, I need to get up and go and get ready. But I just couldn't think of the process that I had to do that. I knew I needed to get up, but I just couldn't sort of work out what I was doing. So I was thinking, right, what do I need to do first? And then my brain would be blank, and then I'd sort of repeat that. Okay, what do I need to do first? And I just went on like this, and I probably did this for about half an hour. And then eventually my husband had got up already. He was sort of getting ready for work, and I just said, I can't go into work today. And I didn't know why. I couldn't explain why. I think my brain had just stopped me from physically doing what I needed to do to get up and get ready and to function. So it's like my functioning capability had gone. And so I must have contacted my school and gone and sort of called in sick. And then I went downstairs. Everyone had gone to school and work, and I went downstairs and I basically sat on the sofa and cried. And that's what I did all day long. I cried. And I didn't make meals. I just watched TV. I sort of sat in this crying stupor on the sofa where I just was so upset, and it was like a release, I think, of all my emotions. And all I could do was watch TV, and I would sort of potter to the kitchen every so often and get a drink and come back, and that was all I did. And I probably did that for about 2 or 3 days, and I think I was just so mentally exhausted that was the level I could function at for a few days. And I contacted somebody. There was a support service, like a counselling service for that I can't even remember what it's called now, which is awful, but they were specifically supporting people who worked in education, and I found their number and I called somebody and spoke to an amazing lady and had like an initial chat with her, and that helps enormously because she was so understanding, and I felt like such a failure that I had not been able to go to work and I didn't know what was wrong with me. And she sort of said, you've burnt out. And I didn't put that word to it because I didn't, to me, having a mental health breakdown would have meant that I was hospitalised, or, that I wouldn't have got out of bed because, so I didn't realise quite how serious it was and what had happened. And it was such a relief to hear that that's what it was, and that, it wasn't my fault. That was sort of, the main thing that I got from it, that I wasn't a failure and it wasn't my fault. And she gave me some strategies, and I think I ended up taking a couple of weeks off work. But before I went back, I had a very understanding head teacher, and before I went back, I relinquished all my deputy head responsibility. I couldn't face going back in the same position. I just couldn't have done it. So I relinquished all my responsibility. I reduced my days to 3 days, and I went back into the classroom because I wasn't in the classroom, and I taught, and I went home, and I did that for the rest of the year. And I knew I was going to leave, and I gave my notice in. But I really wanted to stay until the end of the school year because that just helped me to process what had happened and helped me to feel less like I was failing, because that was a huge thing for me that I had, by leaving, I had failed somehow because of the reasons that I was leaving. It wasn't me leaving. It's almost like a sort of culture, and I don't know where it comes from, and I don't know if it's in all workplaces, but a culture of, if you leave because you go on maternity or you have a family or you move house, that's okay in my, in inverted commas, or get a promotion, or, go to a different school, whatever. That seemed to me, in my mind, to be an okay reason. But to leave to say because I'm not coping, I couldn't personally do that. I found that really hard.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I know, it's still difficult for you to talk about, and so I really appreciate you being very honest and open with what you experienced. And what you touch on there about your thoughts and fears of being a failure are very normal. I think it's not just women who struggle with this. I know certainly from men that I've spoken to, and I had my partner on the podcast quite a few months ago talking about his struggles with imposter syndrome, and had a lot of people reach out on the back of that who, said as males they were also really struggling with that pressure of having to perform, having to, whether it's earn a certain amount of money or show up in a certain way at work or in your family. And I think, as you say, we've inherited this belief in our culture and society, certainly in the westernized world, in the more developed part of Western society anyway, that success and happiness is what everyone must have, in order to be like normal. And I'm using, for anyone who's not watching it, the fingers for inverted commas there, because this belief that normal is, having a very busy job and a very busy life and lots of friends and lots of things going on socially and so on, it is what's burning us out. That's the reality, isn't it? So when you were working and you said, you knew your job was very busy and you had 2 young children and your home and everything else that goes with that, did you feel as though you were stressed with it, but that was just how life had to be?
No, that's the thing. I didn't feel stressed. I think I'd become so accustomed to living at that level of stress and pressure that I didn't feel it. It just felt a normal thing. So quite a few people had said, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say something? And it was because I didn't realise. I just didn't know. And what happened just before burnout was, I decided we'd gone to the coast, and we'd been to this particular place on the coast a few times and always had a really lovely time. It was like a very relaxed place to be, and I loved that the children could play on the beach, and it was sort of a way of life that I was hankering after, and it just seemed to be more healthy, outdoor living and being outside more. And I persuaded, really, because he didn't want to do it, but he sort of went along with the finding out. But I persuaded my husband that we should move to the coast because we would have a better quality of life. And we went and looked at some houses, and I didn't tell the children, didn't tell anybody else, because I still wasn't quite sure why I was doing it. It was my way of getting away and having a legitimate reason to leave my job. And we went to look at some houses, and we sat and had a coffee after we'd seen sort of them. And my husband said, I really don't want to move. Not at the moment. And we had this whole conversation, and we agreed we wouldn't. And then that was the Sunday, and then we went home, got on with things. And the Monday morning was when I couldn't get out of bed. And I think it was because my get out exit route had gone. And then subconsciously was when my mind decided that, okay, you haven't got another get out clause, so it's just going to stop. And I just found it so fascinating. Like, once I'd gone through the other side and sort of analysed it, that I just found it so fascinating, because I have enjoyed being in positions of having that sort of deputy head role. I liked that. I've enjoyed being successful in my career, and I always wanted to I wanted to be the head teacher, or head teacher. I've always wanted to do those sorts of roles and enjoyed that leadership a lot. So I just found it very interesting afterwards that I just sat with this stress and sat with it and just hadn't seen it coming at all, not in the slightest. So no, I didn't feel stressed, but I obviously was.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I got goosebumps actually when you said about the journey you had to try to persuade your husband to move and look at houses, and then when he said no, because you mentioned your subconscious mind, and that's what so many people, normal people, certainly I didn't know about this many years ago. It was only because of my interest and challenges I had with my mental health that I learned about this quite some years ago. But for most people, you don't think about that. You are just living, and you're a human, and your body works and your brain works, and you get on with life. But your subconscious mind is so powerful. And my main coaching program is called Mind Body, because of that connection we have completely internally between our mind and body. And you hear things like this when people have hit some kind of burnout or overwhelm or other, even maybe an illness, but it's their mind and body that connect, which actually is often the signal something is seriously not right. Because, as you said, you didn't even realise you were looking for this escape route, for a way to not live and feel the way you did. And when that was removed, then your mind has, processed that, and without you consciously doing it, said, this is enough, we can't now, there isn't a way forward. And I know certainly I've experienced this as well, and I've hit burnout more than once, and it's very scary. But then afterwards you can start to look back and piece things together. But when you're in it, logically, you're not thinking, oh, well, this happened and that's why I feel like this. It's just so scary, because you do actually feel as though your mind has taken over your body and you can't control your mind. So when you look back now, in the work that you've done to recover from that, what things did you start to see that you thought, right, that has to change and now can't be like that or work like that?
So it was quite a long process. I decided, so this sort of happened in about September, October of the school year, and I reduced my hours straight away, and I decided I was going to leave, but I didn't leave until the July. So I had quite a few months of thinking about what I would do job-wise, to move forward, because I wanted to work, I enjoy work, but I just couldn't see how I could be in teaching anymore. And then I sort of looked for different jobs. I looked at a couple of jobs and I just couldn't find anything. I couldn't see what I wanted to do. So about the Easter time, I'd looked into a few things, and I had a chat with a family member, and they said, oh, why don't you do tutoring? And I said, oh, I don't think so. I just want to leave teaching. I just wanted to escape from it. I didn't want to even think about it anymore. I wanted to put it in a box and close it and do something completely different. So I started doing a little tiny bit, because on the days that I wasn't working in school, and I just loved it straight away, absolutely loved it, and had this realization that actually it wasn't the teaching that I didn't like, it was the working in the school environment, and all those sort of familiar things of why I'd gone into teaching and what I'd loved about teaching, which is basically being with the children and supporting them. I managed to get that. So I think that sort of helped me heal in a way that, because I found joy again in my work, and I didn't know whether I was going to find out anything else that I wanted to do, because also, at I wouldn't say my age, but late 40s, I'd only done teaching. Well, I'd worked in a bank actually before I went into teaching, but I'd spent so long doing teaching, I just couldn't face what I felt was like starting again. It felt like such a huge thing that to start again, but I knew that I couldn't carry on. I couldn't carry on working in schools. It just wasn't going to function. It wasn't going to work. And I went through a whole time period of having to learn some techniques to cope with still going to school. So when I went back to school, even though all the responsibility had gone from the leadership, I was still a teacher, and there's still a huge responsibility teaching, when you're with those children all day and being responsible for them. And so I still learned did some breathing techniques, which I practiced at home, because I found the drive into school really stressful, and my heart would pound. It would come out as like, pounding heart. And I suppose a bit panicky. My breathing was a bit panicky. So I would practice some breathing and relaxation techniques at home, so that when I drove into school, that sort of eased. And that took a while. That took a long time to do that. But I started to look for ways of managing how I was feeling away from work. And it wasn't as all-consuming. I sort of, I'd taken a step back, because it had become all-consuming. It was what I thought about. It's what I woke up at 2:00 in the morning thinking about. And more recently, I've sort of looked into symptoms and things with perimenopause, and I've got HRT, which has helped again with a lot of those symptoms. And I didn't realise quite how they were affecting me as much, because they creep slowly. They just gradually are there, and you don't really notice them until I've taken the HRT, and it's worked really well. And I've just thought, this is what I felt like in my 30s. I remember this feeling of being able to remember names and remember things that I've got to do, and sleeping through the night, and all these things that had gone, and so that has helped with the anxiety as well. But yes, I'm doing a few different things, and but it's definitely, I mean, I left 2 years ago now, and it's still an ongoing journey. I think it always will be.
Yeah, and as I say, health has no finish line. It's not something we work towards and then it's job done, which is how so many women, especially, approach their health. They think about their health as in the size and shape that they are, or how fit they are, that they'll go and join a gym, and then once they've blasted the gym for maybe weeks, or if they can last a few months, and then it's, oh, that's it, I've done it, I can go back to normal, and then they stop doing those things, good things in terms of what they eat and how they move the body, and then they feel the way they used to feel and are back to square one. And so, it's not that it has to always be hard work. It's about finding the things like you've explained with the breathing, for example, that help you, and then making them a part of who you are, so that it just becomes a part of your lifestyle, and you're not having to force yourself and have these big peaks and troughs in the way you feel, and dipping in and out of healthy habits. So what would you say is kind of the biggest learning you've had about your health as you've gone through this journey, and you're now where you are in a much better place?
I think it's probably about taking care of my mental health, and thinking about that, because actually pre COVID, I was exercising quite regularly. I used to run quite a lot, and I think that helped me to maintain my mental health, and helped me to cope with the stress levels. And then through lockdown, I sort of lost those habits, and didn't get them back. And it's about me finding other ways as well as doing that to help me get through. So things like just taking time out and recognizing what it is that are the signs for me that I am becoming overwhelmed, because I still feel overwhelmed a lot of the time. I've got my own business, I'm growing that at still really early stages. I've got two almost teenagers, and it's still busy still, and I take on too much. I find it, my boundaries, I'm having to work all the time on my boundaries, because I like to do things. So I just keep saying, yes, that sounds amazing. Oh, fantastic. Oh, I'd love to do that. And I just keep taking on more and more. But I've recognized what happens when I do that quicker. So I can do things like just take a step back, and then go, actually, I'm not going to book in any more things for Monday, or I'm going to go to the spa for a few hours, or I'm going to take the dog for a walk now by myself, because I just need that brain space. And it's little things, but recognizing it quicker, that's made a huge difference, because I don't ever want to get to that burnout again, and I think it would be so easy to do. And it's not pleasant. So trying to, I'm much better at recognizing it, I suppose, and acting on it. Not just recognizing it, but actually acting on it.
Yeah, it's self-awareness, and you've touched on this a lot throughout. It's self-compassion. And I've often said self-compassion's the biggest missing piece of the well-being puzzle, because often people come at improving their health and well-being from a place of negativity. It's about stopping something, removing something, having to do something, and then feeling guilty or punishing yourself when it isn't going the way that you wanted it to go. And that way that many of us are, with lots of negative self-talk and criticism, is very, very damaging. We have to support ourselves, and we've got to be compassionate to others as well as to ourselves, because life can be challenging. It is very busy, and if we aren't our number one supporter, then what does that say about us as an individual? So I love how you've said that awareness piece is very important, but also recognizing that you aren't some superwoman woman, you are human, and you can only do so much in a day, and you do have your children to take care of as well, and a dog and your health. So, it's having to find that balance. And it, as you said, it's a learning process. I'm still learning. I'm a health coach, but I still have to learn. But I think the difference, and maybe you can say this now, is once you've kind of brought that to your conscious mind and you're aware of it, doesn't mean you always get it right, but it means you can catch it when you aren't feeling your best, or when you're doing something that you think, actually, this isn't going to help me because I know what I need. Have you felt that shift and found it to be quite a powerful thing to now know?
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about, that self-compassion and guilt, I was my own worst enemy, because there was no one else telling me that I had to work longer hours, work more, take on more responsibility. It was all my own choice, and it was all my own sort of drive and determination, and what I thought I should be like as a person in that leadership role, or as a mum, or and I sort of almost prided myself on managing all those things, and I kept, and I'm really calm, and everything always goes on internally. So I'm generally really quite a calm person, but I do keep it inside, and I think that was probably the problem of doing that. And as I said, the lady that I spoke to, that counsellor, she was so compassionate, and sort of gave me permission to be kind to myself. And I think because she wasn't family and friends and didn't know me, it really helped. It really did, because she had no reason to say those nice things to me, but she did, and it just made me think, okay, that maybe it is how I feel about myself. It's not everyone else's expectation. So yeah, being self-compassionate is hard. I think really hard. A lot of guilt, a lot of what you think should be happening, but yeah, it was all coming internally, which again, why do you do that to yourself?
It's how we've been brought up. That's it's in our makeup, and it's something that is becoming much more apparent, but still not very commonly known. And we have to change that as women, because we are the ones who have the power to change it with the younger generation in our own children. They learn from what they see. And so if we're constantly beating ourselves up and putting ourselves down and, feeling guilty, that does come through. And often we don't even realise that we're saying a lot of that out loud. It becomes just part of what you share in your family and how life is in your home. So, we do need, and that's what my mission is, to help women to know that they are worthy and that they can gain that value of who they are when they do start to take care of themselves. Because I think once, all the pieces come together of what you need, how you operate, the way you think and feel, and you start to then provide the right things to enable you to function in the best way possible through your healthy habits, that then enables you to feel strong, and then that ripples out into you wanting to be, like you said, you don't want to ever go back to the way you felt. So you are now invested in your future, you're protecting your future health, and that's the unlock that comes when you do start to feel much stronger and in control. And then that's what will start to filter down and be modelled to your children and other children around you. As you said, you were a teacher. So, the way you were operating was influencing those very young children at a primary age. And something you touched on with the menopause about that lack of knowledge and awareness and putting those pieces together to actually think, at the time, maybe things are changing, and is this because of my age and perimenopause and the shifts I've got in my hormones? That's a huge thing that so many women are struggling with, because we haven't been educated, again, because our mothers didn't share this, or our female, role models we had as children. All we heard was that it was hellish, and I remember my mum saying, just wait until it's your turn, as though, she was going to be then literally rubbing her hands with glee because I'd finally know what the hell she'd gone through. So, being able to now see that. And again, it's that compassion, isn't it? Actually, I'm shifting. I'm not who I was when I was 25 or 35. Biologically, things are changing in my body. And even when you have HRT, you are still changing. You are still aging. You don't have all of your hormones the way that you did 20 years ago. So it's that compassion and self-awareness that then enables you to go, well, I can't go hammer and tongue at it the way I used to. I now need this. Otherwise, I'm going to experience stress, burnout, or worse, some other kind of chronic illness.
I think the lack of knowledge of perimenopause is so frustrating because, we're bright people who are educated women, and my friends are, and I hadn't even heard of the word until I was probably halfway through it. I think the increase in public awareness is fantastic, really is, because it was just the menopause, wasn't it? You go through it and it's hot sweats, and then it's when you're older, and it's like it doesn't affect you when you're in your 40s. It's like 50s, and it's like this thing that happens to older people. That's what was in my head. But the build up and the sort of experience of things like lack of sleep had a huge impact because it contributes to that, finding it hard to function the next day because you're not getting enough rest. I have said, actually, it would be interesting to know if all things were equal with like my job and the age of my children and home and all, like busy life, if that was say 10 years before and after, whether I would have had the same experience. But I think perimenopause definitely contributed to it's like a perfect storm. All things at the same time.
Exactly, yeah. And there's so much that changes that, that's why I'm so passionate about helping women to see this, because it's not just the hot flushes. Actually, they can be a nice thing to have in a way, because a lot of the other things that shift when we do have the fluctuations in our hormones are things that are very life-changing, and I know it can be very difficult to be in that situation when you have the hot flush. But mental health is a huge thing that's being missed and never understood, and still isn't fully understood in menopause. There's so much, like you said, about the heart palpitations and panic and anxiety, and just the changes that you have in your memory with brain fog as well, and just things that I've noticed, things in myself that have shifted that are quite scary. But again, the difference is because I understand what's happening and I do take care of myself, even though I can't necessarily fix all of those symptoms I have. I know what's going on, and I know that the way I live is going to help minimise them and help to control them with or without HRT, and that's likewise for everyone. So just kind of before we wrap up, Lindsey, I wanted to ask you just a bit of advice, if you have, for anyone who might be, where you are in whatever their job or career is, and know that they're just existing, that maybe they're on that brink, they're living in kind of some state of, denial, feeling that this is just how it has to be, but fearful that something could just tip them over the edge. And you've shifted massively in your career. I moved from corporate into entrepreneurship. I think education into entrepreneurship's an even bigger shift because you didn't have that business background that I came from. So you've been able to make a lot of changes. What advice would you give to someone who thinks there's no way I can change anything, this is just how it has to be?
I think to realise that I think we become very sort of institutionalised, might not be the right word, but especially in education, we become so ingrained, and it was so much a part of my identity that I was a teacher that I just couldn't imagine doing anything else. But there is a life outside of whatever career you're doing, and in hindsight, it was the best thing that I ever did. And I am enjoying my work, I'm enjoying my family time, And it's not that it's easy, but I to have that autonomy to do things how I want to do them and how I think are the best way to do them has really helped as well. The anxiety levels and the stress levels, and I can set the boundaries in the way that I want to set them. So, for example, I don't tutor on Fridays because although I'll still work, I then make sure that I can see my children straight away when they get home from school and have that time. And I know that I need those spaces of time where I'm not interacting with other people so that I can recharge and have the energy. Because ultimately, if I'm not well and I don't have the energy or the capability to run my business or to go to work or whatever it is that you're doing, then that's a much more difficult situation than doing something about it. But it is hard. I think talking to somebody, and I know, counselling, and it was a short couple of conversations I had with somebody on the phone, and it made such a huge difference to my mindset and to how I felt. Huge. And I think talking to somebody, seeing your GP, or just doing something immediately so that you don't get to that point where you physically can't go to work, is definitely worth looking into, and doing something sooner rather than later, because it's a bigger deal, isn't it, when you're doing it much later. But yeah, go for it, please.
Yes, very good advice.
You're not stuck in one thing, although however much it feels like you are, there are always ways and options and things.
Yeah, definitely. And I felt stuck. I don't think I would have had the courage to leave if I hadn't been made redundant. I've shared a lot about that story, and yeah, I'm very similar to you in the changes that it's enabled me to make in every part of my life is phenomenal. I wish that I'd had the courage to do this sooner, because I did spend so many years living in that fight or flight state, highly stressed, highly unhappy. And I think what you've surmised there, Lindsey, is about your purpose. You said earlier that when you thought about what was to come next and you were struggling with that, and you realised, actually, this is what I do enjoy, this is who I am and want to still be, helping children, developing them in terms of their education, supporting families. They're the values that you hold, and now you're choosing to live in a way that makes sure those values are at the forefront of everything you do in your job and at home with your own children. And that's the key. And I'm pretty sure this episode is out the week after one on exactly this conversation about the importance of understanding your values, what values are for those who don't know. So go back and check that one. And yeah, reaching out for help is a powerful thing to do, and often we leave it far too late. Again, as women, we don't want to make a fuss. We do, this comes into the whole menopause conversation. Put up and shut up. It's just how it has to be. It doesn't. Yeah, reach out, and even if you're not quite sure what's going on, if it's to a friend, a family member at first, just to say, look, I'm not sure. And as you found, once you start to open up, there's so many other people experiencing the same, and we can really support one another through what we've learned and had going on in our lives. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. And yeah, if you want to share a little bit, Lindsey, about what you do and what's coming next in your business and how anyone who is interested can connect, because Lindsey is a fantastic maths tutor, and I know it's a subject that many children struggle with. So if you need extra help, then Lindsey can tell you where to find out more.
Yeah, so I tutor 6 to 11-year-olds in maths. I tutor online, so I work with children all over the country and different countries, and I focus on developing children's confidence in maths, because I've seen throughout all the time that I've been teaching how confidence really impacts children's learning, and how so many children have maths anxiety or feel like they're no good at maths and they can't do anything about it. So it was something that I was really passionate about, because I know it doesn't have to be like that with the right support. So I do online tuition. I have recorded lessons that I make that children can do at home with their parents and resources. And I'm now growing my business and expanding it to help other tutors, because it was such a huge learning curve when I left education. I didn't know anything about doing accounts, marketing, emails, Facebook, all those things. I had no clue. I hadn't come from a corporate environment, and I've learned those things as I've set up my own business and made a success of that. And I think, again, it's having help from people. I had help from people along the way, and it made such a difference to what I could do, and I didn't have to do it all by myself. And so I want to be able to do that and help more tutors get started, and also people that are unfortunately leaving teaching because of the stress, which is really high numbers, and don't know what to do and don't know what else to do, and often look into tutoring. But the thought of setting your own business up and doing it and what you have to do can be quite overwhelming. So I want to be able to help people to do that and realise that it is really manageable, and you can change your whole life from changing your job.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah. And I'll pop the links to where people can connect in the show notes, but just to let them know where's, the main place that they could find you online.
So my business is called Reach Online Tutoring. I'm mainly on Facebook. I have a Facebook page. I've got a website. I'm on Instagram. And I have a fantastic Facebook group for parents, which is called Building Confidence in Maths Confidence. I never get the name of it right. I should know it by now. Building Maths Confidence in 5 to 11-year-olds. But basically, it's full of parents who want to have ideas and ways and resources and ideas to help their child at home with maths. So I love being in there. Come and join me. That would be great.
Oh. Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. And it's lovely to hear how passionate you are about wanting to help other people, because you recognise that there's a lot of teaching staff who aren't enjoying the world of education in the typical sense, in employment, and are looking for different ways out. And, that's something I'm also really passionate about, because now we're here doing it, as you say. It's not easy having your own business and building it from the ground up, but because we're doing it in alignment with our purpose and values, it's very fulfilling, and we want other people to be able to do the same if that's what would help them to live a happier life and to find more balance, which is the key, as you say, and that's now what you're trying to continue with and build across your whole life and family, to make sure that you are living a strong, healthy life for as long as you can.
Yeah, I want to be doing this, and as I said before, I enjoy working. I enjoy helping children. That was the whole reason I'd gone into teaching in the first place, and I want to do it for a really long time, but I want to do it in a way that means that I can live as well and not just be all consumed by my job.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Well, thanks so much for sharing your story. I do really appreciate how, honest and open you've been about your experience, and it's great to see that you are really thriving now, and that you're also very open about it being a constant journey, and one that evolves depending on what's going on in your life and what you then need. So I really appreciate your time and chatting with us. Thank you.
Thank you.